The big story, undoubtedly, is South African billionaire businessman Patrice Motsepe being re-elected unopposed as the president of the Confederation of African Football for a second time. Motsepe says he'll be focusing on improving football infrastructure, increasing investments, and strengthening the commercial sustainability of CAF during the Federation's extraordinary General Assembly that was held in Cairo. He's also touched on making significant progress in women's football globally. Let's make sense of this with sports analyst Khanyiso Tshwaku, who's with us in studio. Great to see you in person. Thanks for popping in. I suppose there's no greater vote of confidence than Patrice Motsepe being re-elected unopposed.
It is. Look, I mean, if you look at the financial stability, then it's been part and parcel of the Confederation of African Football under Patrice Motsepe. It warranted a vote unopposed. If one of the key points that you raised was the development of infrastructure. If you remember, one of the things that Motsepe put in place was that if countries don't have football infrastructure that is fit to host internationals, they were unable to host games at home. That's why we saw an influx of teams playing the qualifiers in South Africa, playing the qualifiers in Egypt and in Morocco. There have been countries now who slowly but surely got their infrastructure back up to standard to actually be able to host internationals. But I think from a financial sustainability perspective, that is where probably Motsepe has been a wonder for CAF.
Yeah, in fact, he's spoken about reducing that number of countries who couldn't play at home from 36 to something like 12, which is a significant difference. What I found interesting, though, is commentary around, focusing on football infrastructure in nations that don't have hospitals, roads, for example, and other pieces of infrastructure, and the connections he made about how the one could possibly feed into the other.
So one of the key parts about being an AFCON host, for example, is that it then forces the government. It will then force a government to build roads. You're going to need hospitals to take players to. You're going to need better stadium infrastructure. You're going to need better airport infrastructure. And so I think one of the things that he's trying to push with nations that keep your infrastructure up to speed, because what you really want is that once you start bidding to host AFCON or Chad or any other CAF event for that matter, remember that you've got men's and women's junior age group events. You've also got the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, which insofar has been held exclusively in Morocco. It should be moving to other countries at the moment. So if you now want to be in a position to host CAF events, you need to ensure that the infrastructure is there, and by the time the event comes around, it's just a case of touching up what's already there and not starting infrastructure from scratch.
Yeah, hopefully that does happen, right? There's a lot to be said about having him improve the sustainability of CAF, financial sustainability, but what about the quality of the sports in his first term? Has that improved?
Well, I mean, the African Cup of Nations, the 2024 one, was probably rated as one of the best AFCON editions we've seen. I mean, for South Africans in particular, AFCON started to be a thing from 1994 onwards. But when you look at the 2024 edition and you look at the quality of the officiating, you look at the quality of the video assistant refereeing, which is now the benchmark across the world, because a lot of associations, even confederations who looked at CAF, looked at how CAF used VAR, looked at the quality of CAF's match officials, and they realized that actually Africa is putting itself out as a benchmark of how to host tournaments and how tournaments should be officiated. And you need to understand that CAF federations have different challenges. I mean, if you look at West Africa will have a different set of challenges as compared to East Africa. East Africa different with Central and North Africa. So to find the balance and to host brilliant tournaments, we will see how the Cote d'Ivoire tournament raised the bar. It's in Morocco at the end of the year. Morocco have been pioneering toast events, have been the consistent hosts of the WAFCON. So it's going to be interesting to see whether now Morocco will take the African Cup, men's African Cup of Nations, a step further from the wonderful tournament we saw in Cote d'Ivoire last year.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll be able to unpack a whole lot more of Motsepe's legacy. We'll have to leave it there for now. Khanyiso Tshwaku, thanks very much indeed for popping by. He, of course, is a sports analyst.